You're listening to the Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry podcast, and I'm your host, Abuja-based event photographer Tavishima Ayede. First of all, apologies. I've been away for a very long time. And also because there's going to be some background noise today because I'm having to look for a not so quiet place at home to record because the kids are around as per the COVID situation, and so you might hear some traffic in the background. Now, a recap before we get into today's topic. The last couple of episodes that I did, I think 3 or 4, I can't remember, were based on conversations that I had with my undergraduate, with my mentee, who is currently doing an undergraduate program in my alma mater at the University of Aberdeen. Now, we were discussing other things that are important in building your wedding business beyond personal selling. And I think we have discussed money pitfalls, we've discussed online funnels, and I think we've also discussed branding. That was probably the last topic. So today we're going to look at multiple income streams and building healthy finances. The study material that this is based on, just like in the previous episodes, is also based on the Sell the Couch podcast, episode 227. For those of you who haven't been following the podcast, the reason why I recommended it, while we're using the Sell the Couch podcast, is because my mentee, who is also looking at becoming a wedding photographer just like I am, is currently studying, I think it's psychology or something like that. So she's in the mental health sciences. So for me, it was important that I would share material that would be useful to her in both spheres in both spheres that she's looking at, not just the mental health industry, but also the wedding industry as well. Because from the Sell the Couch podcast, as you can see, there's an emphasis there on selling, and so I thought it would be useful material for her to have. Now, why is that relevant to us? Because if we look at things from an interdisciplinary perspective, there are things that people do in other industries that we can learn from. So, if you have a listen to the podcast, that is the Sell the Couch podcast, episode 227, you'll see that there's some useful stuff that you can apply here. And if you look at previous episodes of this podcast and to get a sense of how we've been riffing on different things, you see that it's not a bad idea to look at things from a multidisciplinary approach. So that's my first recommendation. Listen to the podcast that the study material was based on and see what we can learn from our friends in the mental health industry. Now, my take about multiple income streams and healthy finances. Since there's a lot that can be said about this, I'm not going to go into detail about what this podcast or what other material has explored about the topic. So I'll just go straight into my take. So my own take when it comes to multiple income streams is, first of all, solidify your first income stream. The reason why I say this is because over here in Abuja and back when I was based in Lagos, I'd get lots of fellows come up to me and they say, I want to be a wedding photographer, or I'm into this cake thing, but I currently work with GT Bank, or I'm with this, with this corporation or that corporation, and I'm tired, I just want to leave. And I think that that's a big mistake. I think first of all, you should solidify your first income stream before you walk away from it. In fact, other sales authorities like Grant Cardone would say never walk away from any viable income stream that you have. Although my own recommendation is, because you can't really force someone to stay in a job where they don't want to be in the job, is I think for those of you who want to get into the wedding industry, if you're not married now, then I think it's a good idea to build up your first income stream, which is the job that you have, up to a certain level where it'll be able to cover for your living expenses. Anticipate that you probably get married soon, and when you do, expenses rise. When you get a wife and then you have kids, or the other way around, when you get a husband and then you get kids. So you need to put something away in the kitty first before you take the plunge and become a wedding industry professional. So that's my first recommendation. Solidify your first income stream. before looking for other ones. And on the extreme end, you have people like Grant Cardone who say never walk away from a viable income stream. Now, a very good example that I have here is a friend of mine, Shagun. He's my partner. I outsource all my video work to him, not just in the wedding industry work, but also for the corporate work that I do as well, when I'm doing work for government agencies, NGOs, and things like that. So for Shagun, he used to be in the he's from a corporate video background, and they wanted to diversify their income streams, and so they came into the wedding industry. So that's a perfect example. They have some money coming in from the corporate events industry, and then they diversify to weddings. Now, they get into the wedding industry, and they do this for a couple of years. I'm running videos with Shagun for a while, for about 2-3 years, and then he and his partners think, why not diversify the income stream? And so they take a step into, I think the first thing they did was pyrotechnics. That's pyrotechnics are like the fireworks and all the explosive stuff that go on in weddings today. So they diversified into fireworks, and then after that they added lighting equipment, that the strobe lighting and things like that light up the dance floor. And I think as of now they've also moved into the smoke machines. I'm not sure if they're called smoke, but anyways, for that smoky effect that you get when the couple is having the first dance. So that's an example of how using this idea about solidifying an income base and then moving away, adding to it later on after you get some traction. So this is just a perfect example, my friend Shagun. So first of all, corporate events, then into the wedding industry, but video only. Then after that, add pyrotechnics. After that, add lighting. Then after that, they added the smoke. So that's one example. Now, another perspective that I think would come in handy for those of us, particularly in the Nigerian wedding industry, is if we think of multiple income streams using Kiyosaki's Cashflow quadrant. Now, some of you are going to be familiar with Robert Kiyosaki. He's the fellow who wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but Rich Dad, Poor Dad is not just one book, but it's a series of books that span the whole gamut on what it takes to build viable businesses. Now, if you read Rich Dad, Poor Dad and some of the books that come after that, you'll find out that one of the most useful tools, in my own opinion, that they have is called the cash flow quadrant. Now, that's something, for those of you who remember, who are good in math, you remember the x-axis and the y-axis. Basically, you just draw a cross on a sheet of paper, and then in the quadrants, on the top left quadrant that's facing you, you put in the letter E. At the bottom left quadrant, you put in SE. At the top right quadrant, you put in the letter B, and at the bottom right quadrant, you put the letter I. Again, for those of you who didn't get it the first time, if you wanted to try it out, you just get a sheet of paper, draw an x-axis and a y-axis. That's just a big cross down the page, and then the letters that you're going to write are the top left quadrant, write E, bottom left, SE, the top right, write B, and below that, write I. Now, the letters stand for E for employee, SE for self-employed, B for business owner, and I for investor. The reason why I think this is really apt when it comes to Nigerian wedding industry professionals is because it charts the typical flow that a lot of us go through. For instance, my wedding cake was made by a lady. I think her name is Lola. I can't remember because I haven't been in touch with her in a while. But the business name that she's known by is Dainty Affairs. Now, when I got married close to 10 years ago, she wasn't as big as she is today. And at the time, I think she was working with Guarantee Trust Bank, I think. But that is no allusion to but that's not a reference to the earlier conversation that I made reference to. That's in this podcast. So anyway, Lolade, that's Dainty Affairs, cake artist. At the time, she was an employee who worked with Guaranteed Trust Bank. And she decided to start a cake making outfit which is called Dainty Affairs to this day. You can check them up on Instagram. Really lovely cake and sugar work and things like that. So now at that stage, she moved from the employee quadrant to the self-employed quadrant. Now, for Robert Kiyosaki, the difference between self-employed people and business owners, basically, that's in their own frame of reference, is that the business owner has structures in place so that he or she doesn't necessarily have to be there all the time. You can take a break, you can leave, or you can sell the business, and it will focus and it'll run well without you. And I think that's the stage that Lolade is at now. That's Dainty Affairs. So she bakes the cakes because she loves doing it, but she doesn't necessarily have to do so because she has capable hands. And I think she runs I'm not sure if you would call that a catering school, but she has a school where she's teaching people how to bake cakes and also become cake artisans, cake artists, and become wedding industry professionals themselves. Now, the bottom of the cash flow quadrant, the I stands for investor. Just as a recap, we've gone from E, which is employee, where a lot of us will start off, SE, which is self-employed, where some of us move into when we start our hustle. And then after that, we have the B, which is a business owner, and then the final quadrant, which is investor. Now, the idea behind the investor quadrant is that when you're in the business owner segment, you've made quite a bit of cash, and you're able to take these excess proceeds and invest into some other things that give you returns periodically on a passive basis, that you don't need to put too much effort into. So hopefully, I'm sure you guys can see why using the cash flow quadrant is a useful way for Nigerian wedding industry professionals to think about things, because that's how a whole lot of us are going to move through not just life, but the Nigerian wedding industry scene. In my own case, I didn't start off in the employee quadrant. Yes, I had been involved in the civil service, administration of health benefits, and I did some legal work. But by the time I came back to Nigeria, I just jumped pretty much into being self-employed, and hopefully I'm going to make the transition into being a successful business owner, and then investing is going to be down the line, especially since my wife has a professional interest and background in these sorts of things. So hopefully we're going to make some good money there as well. So wedding industry professionals, Nigerian wedding industry professionals, please pay attention to Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant, books from the Rich Dad ecosystem, and because these are really useful ideas to look at. So following the cash flow quadrant, if you run through the different quadrants, each time you make sure that your income, whenever in your one particular part of the quadrant, you maximize the income that you can get there before you move on, and eventually you get loads of income streams. Again, with the summary, like with Lolade, you're working with GTB, max out your income with GTB. Then you become self-employed, max out your income being self-employed. Then you need to set up infrastructure and put machineries in place so you can become a successful business owner. And when you max that out, you take your proceeds and then you become an investor. So that's all I have to share today about multiple income streams and having healthy finances. Like I said, the study material on which this discussion was based is episode 227 of the Sell the Couch podcast, and then also looking at Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant. So thank you very much for listening. As usual, please subscribe, like, share, follow using whatever podcatcher you have, whether it's Google, iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, whatever it is. I'd appreciate it if you do that. And then also you can see some of my work and also DM me, send me a direct message on Instagram. I'm on Instagram as at Ayede_photography. Ayede is AYEDE. That is A for Alpha, Y for Yankee, E for Echo, D for Delta, and E for Echo _ photography. Thank you very much, guys, for listening, and I'll catch you on the next episode.